maybe 2 months later, I was like, no, this isn't going to work for me. The way that we are treated, the way that we are spoken to, the way the rules are written in a way to cover their behind while also making sure that it's vague enough to make sure we can do whatever they tell us to do. I was like, this isn't right. We need to be unionized.
Welcome to Fight Back Radio, a production of fightbacknews.org, taking you to the heart of the people's struggle. I'm your host, Richard Berg, and today my guest is Rasaq Adeyemi, who is a flight attendant at Delta Airlines, but more importantly, and he'll be speaking today as a member of the organizing drive to unionize at Delta, the American the Association of Flight Attendants. Do I have that right for the union name?
Yes.
And we're going to talk a little bit today about why a union at Delta Airlines, and as our Fight Back Radio listeners know, we've been talking a lot about unionizing and organizing the unorganized, and this is one of the preeminent campaigns in the country on that. And so I hope you'll enjoy the show. I'm sure you will. We have an excellent guest here. So, Rasaq, let me start out by asking you, the airline industry is a heavily unionized industry, but the flight attendants at Delta are not unionized. And why is that? And why are you guys trying to unionize now? Why them? Why now?
So it's more than one reason why. So let me break it down. And it's not just the flight attendants. As you said, it's a heavily unionized industry. And amongst that, not only our flight attendants, but our rampers and their mechanics, other areas are also trying to unionize. And the reason why now is, to put it simply, there was a time where we had leadership that did a better job at putting people first. And we have moved into, like all of America, we're in a hyper capitalistic society. And what's first is profits and shareholders. That is the goal, not only of Delta, but of all companies that are publicly traded. So with that being said, fine, make the money, because I love when my checks can be signed and deposited. The only way to have a entity that will put the labor force first is to have a union. And coupled with that, why previously not at this airline is because we're based out of Atlanta, Georgia, which doesn't have a history of being pro-labor, if I put it lightly. The history of how labor is treated in the state tends to be how things are going now. And we're fortunate enough to be in a time where information is flowing freely, where previously a lot of the information and a lot of the rhetoric was that the unions just want to take your money and they want power for themselves and it has nothing to do with you. Well, now because of shows like this and social media, people are realizing, like, oh, wait, the union isn't a third party. The union is us, our labor force, and we make that up. Even people that have bad experiences with them are starting to realize, oh, I had a bad experience because I wasn't involved or I didn't participate, not because the union itself is inherently bad.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. So, I mean, there's really, tell me if I'm wrong here. There's really four really big airline industries: American, United, Delta, and Southwest. And then the other ones are smaller, either often regional carriers or whatever. And the others are unionized. But it's interesting you talk about the South, because I think Atlanta, which is in Georgia, of course, because when the country unionized in the 30s and then the public sector more in the 60s and 70s, the South was always carved out separate, and it was like non-union, and the level of exploitation was much higher. The level of racism and dividing people by race was higher, and that seems to be I don't know. I'll let you comment on it. It seems to be breaking down somewhat. I mean, we just saw in the auto industry, Volkswagen unionized in Tennessee, and there was a near victory at Mercedes-Benz in Alabama. So maybe whatever. And I'm seeing even the voting trends in Georgia are changing a little bit. So I don't know. Do you want to comment on that? Does that sound right to you? Or
I love to comment on it. Yes, and it's partly with what I was saying before in terms of free flowing information, as well as we're living in this time where the cost of living everywhere is going up. So people are migrating from different areas. Travel itself is just more common. So where it used to be all of the South was pretty rural. The vast majority of the South was rural and kind of closed off to meeting other people, other perspectives. Well, that's not the case anymore. You have an influx of people. You have people coming and going and with families and colleges. And now we're getting a better circulation of thought. People are able to empathize and see outside of their singular perspective. And let's be frank about it. A lot of these companies are billion-dollar companies, and they have a nice closed captive audience during training where they can say, let me tell you what's best about unions. Well, that's kind of a fox guarding the hen house. If I don't necessarily need to hear what's best for the nail coming from a hammer.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Well, let me ask you about maybe get a little bit of your personal story here, Rasaq. So you're a flight attendant now, and you're part of an organizing drive. What's your background? How did you come to become a flight attendant? What led you to this career path? And then once you were there, why did you join the union organizing drive? I mean, you're one of the leaders of it right now. You're on the main committee that's
Yes.
organizing this stuff here. I should tell our Fight Back Radio listeners, you're not just some flight attendant. You're one of the leaders.
That is correct.
And but how did you get from from where you started to there?
Well, fresh out of college way back in 2006, I was a music teacher. For those that were around, that was when the budgets to arts programs were being slashed left and right. All the jobs was really leaving the country. And it kind of was an eye opener to how labor is perceived and the working class labor is perceived in the country. So me having that music background, I started playing the drums, was playing in different areas, ended up at a job that required that the musicians be union because they was already a unionized place. And I was like, wait, I got to do what? So this is my first time outside of what I've heard on mainstream media or on TV about union. So they had us come to our local, and they started breaking down like what's going on. And I'll never forget it. It was a really good friend of mine that I've known since junior high school. We were in the exact same place at the exact same time on the other side of the country. And as they was explaining it, we looked over at each other and was like, wait, this is what a union does? This is awesome. Wait a second. You're making sure that I'm not exploited, that I'm not taken advantage of, that things are fair. Because in that negotiation, like all negotiations, both sides have a say. So both sides was able to come to an agreement. So that's how I began my union journey. Well, years later, I was still living in California, but my mother came down with skin cancer. I came home to visit, and it just really wasn't sitting good on me for me to be that far away, seeing that deterioration. So I decided to move back to Atlanta, move my mother in, and really make sure that I'm here for a family. And I come from a long line of people that worked for Delta. That's why I have a very good understanding of how it used to be, at least according to their words. And I started working there. Everything was decent in the beginning. I generally was like, I want to wait and see how it goes. Maybe they don't need a union. Maybe, it could be anything. Maybe 2 months later, I was like, no, this isn't going to work for me. The way that we are treated, the way that we are spoken to, the way the rules are written in a way to cover their behind while also making sure that it's vague enough to make sure we can do whatever they tell us to do. I was like, this isn't right. We need to be unionized here. I shortly after met someone that was on literally the very first person I met. She ended up contacting Sarah Nelson. She was the
So
spearhead at
Sarah
the time.
Nelson's the national president
Yes,
of
she's the international president. Yes,
international president of the Association
yes,
of Flight Attendants.
yes. So I started. I said I was down to, like, you know, sign a card and put my name down for people that are supportive. And shortly after, I ended up getting a call like, "Hey, would you mind helping out a little bit?" I was like, "Sure, I'll help out a little bit." And in the midst of that, I saw the union busting tactics once again coming from a multi-billion-dollar company versus, at the time, 20, 30 flight attendants. And I was like, okay, the least I could do is contribute. And that snowballed into being where I am now. And I don't regret a single step of the way. Full steam ahead.
Can you talk a little bit, Rasaq, about the union busting tactics that you saw and what that looked like, and what the company did? So it wasn't just, we live in America and we're supposed to have democratic processes, and if workers want to have a union, they should be allowed to have a fair and free vote. And I come out of the labor movement as well, so I know that that's not the case almost always. But can you talk a little bit about Delta and the union busting tactics that things they've tried to do to divide people?
So some of the many things is misinformation. They'll say that negotiations take a snail's pace, is the term that they like to use. But what's failed to be mentioned is both sides are coming together in this negotiation, and which side is negotiation in good faith, and which one is causing the snail's pace. It'll be a lot of literature easily available for anti-union rhetoric. But if we come in to try to support the union, then hey, you can't have that sign, you can't sit here, you can't do that. But all of the anti-union things can be anywhere, everywhere. They also take care of captive audiences. There's a meeting for the people while they're in training, and they're just demonizing and villainizing unions the whole time. That, amongst other things, they just generally try to make it hard for us to communicate. And the biggest one is they created a culture of fear. People are fearful, even if they are supportive, because even though retaliation is illegal, they fear retaliation because they weren't able to get the information. And one thing that I will say, I just want to tag on to that. Anybody that is afraid, just understand, wearing a pin, being vocal is a shield. It is not, it will not cripple you.
Yeah, no, I mean, legally it gives you a little bit of extra, actually, because if you get fired for your union activity, or if you get reprimanded, and you try to file a charge with the National Labor Relations Board, they call it an unfair labor practice. The boss will say, "Oh, well, we didn't know that Rasaq was or whoever it is was supporting the union. How could we know that?" And if you're wearing a pin or if you're doing something public, it gets you past, it helps get you past that. It's like the National Labor Relations Board isn't a cure-all. Actually, the real power comes from your coworkers, is my experience. But
Exactly.
yeah, so yeah, so tell me a little bit about being a union activist. So you're on you're on this, what, the steering committee? What do they call the committee you're on?
I'm on a few committees, but
Okay.
the one that is generally trying to steer the direction of the campaign and make sure that we're all on one accord and kind of moving cohesively, that one we do call the steering committee.
Okay. And so, but you and all the union supporters, I imagine, are going out constantly and talking to your coworkers about the union, et cetera. Can you talk a little bit about, how you approach a flight attendant about saying, you need to be in the union? And I mean, you told us a little bit about your story and your background with the musicians union, but flight attendants, from what I can see, are, they come from all over the place, all different kinds of backgrounds.
Literally.
And so yeah, just geographically and everything else. Yeah, exactly. But so how do you approach your coworkers about, and how do you talk to them about being involved in the union? And then also, what kind of resistance is common, and how do you deal with that as well?
Well, the way I approach it, first things first is I listen. I want to hear what they have to say. I won't even I generally won't kick in the door and say, "Hey, everybody, I'm organizing a union. Let's do this." No, I want to listen to how a person feels, who they are, because it's not just a card signing drive. You can't have an effective union if no one's relatable to each other. We don't actually know each other. That's honestly, that's just a company at that point. So I start off, I listen, see what's important to them, get to know them, let them get to know me so they understand that I'm not just some rando that is saying any old thing. And I try to come at them at the points that they find important. So if they find the our punitive sick policy important, or if they're a caregiver, or if they have children, the things that are relatable to them. So this way they can see and understand how they could personally benefit. And then, foster that conversation. A lot of the time, the resistance that I get is it comes from those captive audience meetings that they have earlier. They have, well, I heard that all the union wants is to take half of my check or something like that. And I'm like, well, that's not how it works. The union would be us. So we would determine a lot of these things. The biggest part that I think could be that our hindrances is people give us the third party treatment, and people think that they're just fearful. So we can have them no longer be afraid because it is us, and understand that it's not some mysterious, misty group. Sarah Nelson is the international president, but she cannot tell Delta flight attendants what to do. We can all come together and come up with a plan, but she wouldn't run us any more than we would run the flight attendants at United.
Yeah, no. So just for our Fight Back Radio listeners, when you talk about a captive audience, means that's a meeting that the employer says you have to go to. Sometimes they're in groups or small groups, big groups, or one-on-one even, and it's because of your job, and you got to listen to this anti-union, blah blah blah, and the union's not able to be there to respond or anything else. So it's a way to create fear, intimidation, but also just to tell lies and give false stories.
And for a
Um,
lot of people, that's their first opportunity to really hear and conversationally what is a union. So this is a lot of people's first impression of a union.
yes.
And by leaning it in that way, in a way that is negative, it's not accidental. It is very much done on purpose.
Yes, and also I wanted to say about I thought you answered the question really well, but about the third party, and that's like this is a very common tactic of the employers, and this is like they have textbooks and high priced lawyers that'll tell them how to do all this stuff, but it's to say, well, what's the union going to do for me, or what's and so Sarah Nelson as the president, what's she doing, or vilify her, whereas anybody who's been in a union knows that if the union is going to be effective and powerful, it has to rely on where its power comes from, which is the members. In this case, the flight attendants do all the work along with the other people that are trying to unionize at whatever it's, whether it's ticket counter, baggage, whatever. The workers do all the work for Delta, not the CEO who's I hear off at the Olympics right now. Ignoring ignoring the problems he should be dealing with. We'll get to that though. Let me ask you then about some of the let me ask you a little bit about what it's like to be a flight attendant. I mean, most of our Fight Back Radio listeners are probably like me. They fly maybe a couple times a year, or whatever. Not a frequent flyer, but have flown enough and we observe flight attendants in a unique setting. We don't see the backstage as they would say, or whatever.
Right.
And I mean, I'll be honest. I've been extremely impressed my whole life with flight attendants because I've seen them, whatever, just from in the cabin, the pressure that they get from, passengers and different stuff. But they all seem to have, and this is, whatever. I've seen lots of flight attendants. I'm sure you're all different. But the unique thing is people seem to handle it with a lot of just cool and calm, and killing people with kindness, no matter how much of a not kind person they might be. So I imagine you guys have to, when you're after work, you must just have to let a lot go. But can you talk a little bit about being a flight attendant, some of the things that maybe some of the things you like about it, but also some of the things that are difficult and challenging, and that maybe people don't see or hear or wouldn't guess.
Well, that's that. Where do I start? Well, some of the things I like about it, of course, traveling is nice. You get to meet different people, whether it be your coworkers or it's the passengers. Because what a lot of people don't realize is I have coworkers that I absolutely adore, and I may only see them once every 3 years because the nature of the business. Um, Another thing that I like is flexibility of schedule for the most part, but that kind of takes to some of the things that I'm starting to not like. A lot of that flexibility is slowly being deteriorated and turned into profit maximization as if we were robots, and we are not. We do a really good job at handling people, partially because we see literally hundreds of people an hour, possibly. So we go through thousands and thousands of people a day. So while someone's experience may be unique to them and it is their emergency, we recognize that, but it's not the first time we've encountered that emergency, and more than likely it won't be the last. So that's why we're able to handle things with a good amount of finesse and understand, like, what's the first thing I want to do? I want to listen to you. What is going on with you? I want to make sure I empathize, because then you understand that I'm not just faking listening to you, but I'm genuinely listening to you. All right, and now I'm gonna try to solve the problem as best as I can. And we do have limited resources. If there's someone who needs a particular kind of meal, that I can't run to the back and get one, because we might all we have is what we have. But going back to the good thing, because I want to finish off with the good, is that, oh my goodness, you will see some of the funniest things. There is no day is the same. And anytime I told myself, I've seen it all, no, you haven't. You have never seen it all.
Oh Lord, that's great. Well, talk a little bit about some of the things that you're trying, some of the heartache that you're trying to fix to make your job better. I mean, you mentioned scheduling is one thing that the flexibility is deteriorating. Our Delta has taken some of that away. Could you talk a little bit about that, or if there are other things about the job that you hope to improve through unionizing?
There's quite a few things. The ones that I feel hold a lot of weight with amongst a lot of people is we want to have health benefits that have a comprehensive coverage without increasing prices. And right now we have the exact opposite. The price is getting higher, and or the coverage is becoming less. And that's being in a small can of possibly a lot of germs at a time can really wear down on someone, especially for the new flight attendants who just haven't had the opportunity to be there. And a lot of people don't know this, but if you break a pinky, you can't come to work. So we have to have health coverage and the benefits that really help us out there. But even though with that, I will say what it all boils down to is unilateral decisions getting made regarding flight attendants. And we have no say so on it. That's everything from pay to scheduling to uniforms, you name it. We don't have a genuine say so in what's happening in our labor force. And we work there. No, I don't care what anybody says. Anybody that is pro-union is not anti-company. We want the company to thrive and flourish and be profitable, because then we profit on top of that as well. But the issue lies when all of those profits are happening and then we're not getting anything from it. And then on top of that, a decision gets made to take away money, to take away flexibility, and we're just kind of sitting there. It's nothing we can do about it. One of the arguments, I'll just throw this out there last, one of the arguments is, well, they gave us boarding pay. I'll use that one for example. They gave us boarding pay. One, at any given time, they can take that away. They're not contractually bound to do so. Two, right before it, they took away skybooks, which is another form of compensation. So it's like somebody gave you 3 apples right after they took 4. I'm going to look at the totality of it all.
Yep. No, I mean, it's quite common for companies to, where there's a union drive going on and workers are demanding things, to give you stuff, to increase pay or benefits or whatever it is. And but if you don't have a union contract, if it's not in writing, as soon as the threat of a union dies down, they can take the things away. So it's whatever they give you, it's we used to say it's as good as the paper it's written on. And
Right.
if it's not written on any paper, it's not, it's just a temporary promise. So that's good. Let me ask you though about Delta's been in the news recently about there was this computer glitch that there was, and this affected all the airlines, but it seems like it really it gave Delta more troubles than others. And so let me ask you about maybe if you can explain a little bit more than I just did about what actually happened and what's going on there. But then how has that affected the flight attendants at Delta Airlines? And what are your thoughts on if you had a union, what you could do to try to make things better?
Well, the baseline of the issue is I don't know too much more than anyone else that watches the news. There was a computer glitch along with an upgrade that caused a lot of the computers to crash. We weren't the only airline affected, although we were affected the heaviest. I will say, and I mean this wholeheartedly, a lot of why we were affected the hardest was because we don't have the same work rules written out. Our work rules are written in a way that can purely make sure that the company is good while doing just enough to say, hey, we're treating our workers fair enough. A lot of these other airlines have situations where if I'm working and then I have to work something else randomly, that's called a reroute. Or if I'm supposed to be off on Monday, but they're saying, hey, we're going to work you till Tuesday. So I'm flown into my day off. They have certain things where they're protected against those. And if it happens, because things will happen, this is what will be paid. This is how the flight attendant will be compensated. Well, with us not having pay protections, the company isn't incentivized to do those things for us. So when a company knows, well, if I do this to this one flight attendant, I'm going to have to pay them double time. They're going to do everything they can to not have to pay you double time. But when they can just do it, and bless the people in the scheduling office, I know they don't have anything malicious against anyone. They have a computer screen in front of their face and they just got to get it cleared. They're working within the parameters they have. As flight attendants, we can help define the parameters they have that help us and the operation versus just the operation.
Yeah. So you think, let me check my knowledge here if I have this right. So you think some of the problem with getting hit at Delta harder or not being able to deal with the problems as well was because there wasn't, things in writing, incentives, et cetera, that would make the company pay more attention and see a sense of urgency to it.
Yes, I'll get somewhat specific. I know for a fact at certain airlines that they say, well, we have this many flight attendants working. You have to have a certain amount of schedulers to support those people, or you have to have enough people that's working on whatever line that we need to call to be able to support us. Well, with our company, we don't necessarily have that. They can have a bare bones skeleton crew to save profits as much as they can. And now that you have almost 30,000 flight attendants trying to call and you only have 40 people that can answer the phone, now we're getting left behind. So it's one of those things where, yeah, the company may have to pay a little bit more on the front end, but it pays off in the back end. Where right now, we feel as flight attendants, we're getting paid more in the front end, but we're losing it on the back end.
Yeah, yeah, no, that makes sense. Well, let me follow up that a little bit. I know, some of this crisis it wasn't just for flight attendants, for customers and for everybody else that worked for the airlines. And in the midst of this, your CEO went off to Paris to attend the Olympics, and it seemed to me that that was not conveying a sense of urgency or we're going to get things straight for our customers, our employees, or anybody else. How were what was the scuttlebutt? How were flight attendants talking about those kind of things?
It was a mixed bag. You have some people that will just unadulterated that they will support him no matter what he does. A lot of us, the majority of us, thought it was bad optics. This is that, as with all leadership, the buck stops with you. If you're gonna be a fearless leader, we need you to be here in the trenches with us. It's hard for us to really coalesced when we see that there's flight attendants that can't get home. We got passengers that can't get home. You're telling us that we should not use our past travel benefits to go to whatever vacation we had planned or to come back from that vacation we had planned. But it's all right for me to go off and do these other things. Even if you go later or send someone in your place, it's really good to have your leadership there with you. It's inspirational and it really helps us come together. And that was just not the optics of what happened.
Yeah, yeah. Let me. I'm going to pivot a little bit here, but I mentioned earlier that the industry is heavily unionized, and the other majors, American and Southwest, I know have settled their contracts, and I think United is. I think they've had more difficulty. Um, uh, but how does that, how does that affect how you look at, how Delta is treating you guys and your coworkers as a union organizer? Does what happens in the industry affect people's thoughts on, we should get that too, or does it make them more or less likely to want to join your union organizing drive with the Association of Flight Attendants?
Yes, a rising tide lifts all ships. But I understanding how I do, whenever there's a tentative agreement between a company and a union, I'm not just like, hey, I want y'all to sign it because it looks good for us. I support whatever those flight attendants want. Like, as I mentioned before, I can't control them, just like I don't want them to control us. So I support them through it all. But yes, anytime one of these groundbreaking contracts get signed, it is definitely helpful. And right now, we went into the pandemic as a lot of contracts were supposed to start the negotiation process. The flight attendants in good faith were like, you know what? We understand this is a black swan event. We'll hold off. A lot of companies was like, okay, we're going to take as much as we can and we're going to hold it off. And then until the union started to say, hey, we can't hold off anymore. And now is the time. And that's where we're coming to now. So now you have these groundbreaking contracts where the thought was, oh, see, Delta, we got our raises first. Yeah, but they're getting theirs to best. Now it's hard to say that we're the leader of the pack in terms of pay, definitely in sort of profits, but it's hard to say that we're the leader of the pack in terms of pay now that these things are happening. And there's once again, it's in paper. We know for sure they're going to get it, how they're going to get it, when they're going to get it, and what can happen if something glitches in the system.
Yeah, yeah. I want to, highlight something you just said though. I mean, it struck me as you were talking. You really captured what solidarity is, because my hat's off to you for that. This is something I think the labor movement, at its best, does on a regular basis. It's the people that are affected and making decisions and taking actions, but that the rest of the labor movement needs to support them in whatever they're doing in their decisions. And so it's that's what makes us strong, is that we're the fact that if we support each other, whether first in your company, but then secondly within your industry, and then across all the workers of the world unite kind of story.
Mm-hmm.
We can really move mountains or make big changes if people do that. So my hat's off to you. That's actually I think exactly the right attitude. I want to ask you a little bit also about harassment on the job. I know flight attendants is a job. Frankly, I think of like waitresses I've known and people that have worked in taverns and bars that have been harassed. I mean, yeah, that kind of harassment from the boss and medium level supervisors and but also from customers, et cetera. Can you talk a little bit about about that aspect of the job and some you and some of your coworkers, what experiences people have, and how you deal with them, and how a union might help in some of that respect?
Yes, there are several levels of harassment across the board, whether it be for race, gender, code, creed, religion. That is one of the unfortunate realities of just being in the world today. I've dealt with it. I've seen people deal with it. I think one of the hugest deterrents or things that can just help in those moments, because when you're 30,000 feet up in the air, you have limited resources. The best resource you have is your fellow coworker. So if there's someone maybe getting out of line with someone that I work with, because she's a woman, all right, as a male, we tend to try to come and give that buffer space, make sure they know this is not okay. And when we get on the ground, there will be someone waiting for you. We also try to make sure that you have to be a little bit situationally aware. Maybe there may be something that I might see coming, so I'm going to separate myself from it now, and I'm going to ask one of my flying partners, like, hey, can you maybe get eyes on this, or kind of go in between there for me, so this way we can make sure that things don't escalate, because we don't want to escalate things higher. And in terms of how a union could help, it boils down to PR. What none of these companies want is bad public relations. And if it means that sometimes you got to shift blame to a worker to make the paying customer feel like they were right, that's what happens. And we've come to a place where a lot of people think that, oh, all I have to do is write a bad review, all I have to do is complain on X, then I'll get something free in return, that fosters this culture of rewarding bad behavior.
Yeah, yeah. No, and it's I mean, I know most union contracts, and I assume the flight attendants too, um, have clauses in there about what they call just cause. And so there's a criteria for, you have to violate a policy, and the company has to prove that you've done it. It can't just be, oh, somebody said this happened, whatever, and there's no evidence. And so it's, how workers are treated is based more on evidence rather than whatever, some getting a bad
Mhm.
review, or because of who you are or how you dress, you having to deal with garbage from whether it's customers or supervisors. So yeah, thank you for that. I wanted to talk a little bit about you mentioned the third party, and you mentioned Sarah Nelson a few times. I wanted to just she's been a dynamic leader of the labor movement, and has been outspoken about, and I really respect her, because how you stand with her in the labor movement, and so she's been, critical of some of the leadership of the AFL-CIO, and been outspoken about a number of things. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about Sarah and the leadership of the Association of Flight Attendants. And I mean, obviously, the union is the membership, but she's elected, and she was elected by the members to be the leader. And so how you look at the union itself, and your vision, your view of the Association of Flight Attendants.
I have a great deal of respect for her. People may see her moments on CNN or see these viral clips, but they don't understand that there is a lot of work behind what she does. And when you are challenging these huge multi-billion-dollar corporations, they don't like it. And they make sure that you know it. The amount of courage and bravery she has to have day by day to do something to help people that may not ever even meet her. I like to say a lot of the times, I'm trying to help a person whether they want it or not. And that's kind of what I see out of her as well. She is out here beating the drums for union labor, rather they're flight attendants. One thing that I can appreciate is that I personally have been able to benefit as a flight attendant at Delta Airlines, because of the work she's done with AFA. Not she didn't do it specifically for me. I was just able to reap the benefits, and because of that, I have a great deal of respect for her as a person and her work ethic and what she has to endure. I don't think people really understand what goes behind what it is that she is constantly doing for the labor force.
Yeah, no, I think I agree with you there. I want to underline something you said too, because I think it's an important point that you hit on. Is that what the labor movement does certainly benefits its members in a direct way, but it also benefits non-members because it raises the bar up for the whole industry. And so if employers want to hire people, they need to at least be within a stone throw of of
Right.
where everybody else is being how everybody else is being treated, so that when the I mean, I know, like when I was a kid, when the auto workers used to get a raise, all the workers in the country got a raise, not as much as them or as good, but they couldn't be left that far behind. And so the unionized flight attendants, but also every other unionized sector, when they win victories, it raises the standard of living for the working class across the entire country. So, but I want to bring up another issue that's been out there. I think it's an issue with your organizing drive. You can tell me if I'm wrong, but there was an issue where and nationally in the last 9 months, the issue of the war in the Middle East and in Gaza especially has been a big issue. And two of the I think it's two. Tell me if I'm wrong. Two
Yeah,
flight
it's true.
attendants, I think, were wearing lapel pins with the Palestinian flag or something that said Palestine on it, and it created quite a stir. I mean, could you tell a little bit about what actually happened there? Because I'm not sure my facts are exactly right, and then what the reaction was amongst your coworkers and the union drive and the company and et cetera.
So the instance was with two flight attendants. They had a lapel pin that had the Palestinian flag on it. And as flight attendants, our job amongst keeping people safe, we're keeping them safe as we connect the world, as we connect cultures, as we connect families. Their pin, from my understanding, because I haven't spoken with them personally, was for empathy was to empathize and sympathize with the people that were innocent of that place, not taking one side over the other. And there was some chatter online where people were saying, I don't feel safe with this. These were passengers saying, I don't feel safe with this flag. Going back to what I was saying before, rewarding this bad for behavior. So then they were doxxed, they were harassed by the public and the company. Someone that was on running the social media account, they exacerbated the comment. From my understanding, the company has separated ways with the person that made that comment and not with the flight attendants. On that, I do commend them. But going back to that PR, what they said was, we no longer have the ability to wear any country's flag with the exception of the U.S. flag. We, for those of us that have very diverse backgrounds, that is a little bit of a hindrance of our freedom of expression. And it could have, and I cannot stress it enough, because I know people that have Jewish background. It is not about that particular conflict that AFA, Delta AFA, we're not trying to talk about that particular conflict as much as we're trying to talk about the harassment around it. We need the company to take our protection in mind, because that could have just as easily been someone with Israel's flag, and somebody with Palestinian roots could have taken that picture and said then they feel afraid. So, or it could have been someone with a uh, you name a flag. It could have been someone with a Ukraine flag, and then someone from Russia could have said how they felt about it. So it's not about that particular incident. I want to make sure everybody knows that, because I don't want to get into the weeds of what's going on there. But it's a sign that there are times when our protection is put on the back burner to make sure that profits are flowing, PR is good, and we're quiet.
Yeah, yeah. It seems like a hyper nationalist response from Delta, though. Too. I mean, you're an airline that flies all over the world, I think, and so there's yeah. You mentioned places of conflict, but I imagine you have people that are even places where there's not conflict, people that are proud to be French or German or from name a country. I don't know. You can go South America, Africa, Asia too. Yeah, it doesn't have to be Europe. Um, and it seems like it's not the answer. I don't know. I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, that's perfectly it. I personally have Nigerian roots, and even though I don't fly that route very often, maybe sometimes or around Nigerian Independence Day, I want to put my flag on, but I can't do that now. Or we have someone who almost flies exclusively to Mexico City or to a Spanish-speaking country, and they're one of the speakers on board to make sure that there's no language barrier between the crew and the passengers. Now that person can no longer show that pride in what they are, and this can happen any given time about any given thing. There needs to be a sense of accountability towards protecting us in a way that's just not silencing us. And that's what it feels like.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's yeah, I agree, and it seems that and maybe I'm editorializing a bit here, but I mean, people should be proud of who they are, whatever that is. And I mean, if you're Palestinian, you shouldn't be. You have to hide that. That's not the right answer. And if you're Nigerian or have Nigerian roots, you should be proud of those. And whoever you are, I mean, all of our cultures has good and bad and whatever. But the culture itself, the people, it's. Uh, I don't know. I think we that's something you would hope an airline would do is try to bring peoples together and uplift different cultures and things like that.
And where
Um,
does it stop? Does Georgia and Alabama play a game, and then um, after the football game, two people get into a fight? Now I can't wear a Georgia Bulldogs pin anymore.
that might actually happen. So, but let me ask you about the next. And I don't want you to give away your playbook totally, but what are the next steps for the Association of Flight Attendants at Delta, and what do you hope to accomplish in the late summer and fall, as we go
So
forward?
this is our busy season as an industry wide because this is when families are taking their vacation, people are not in school. So there is a level of making sure that we are working. And outside of us working, we're people. Some of us have parents and children and things. So we're trying to make sure that we can balance out our real lives as well. So what's currently happening moving through the summer, we're just trying to continue to collect the information and cards from our flying partners, let the public know that we're out here so we can gain more public support because everybody likes to be on the winning team. And when no one knows what's going on, it gives the perception that we're not making the headway that we really are making. And then moving into the wintertime when things slow down, we plan on picking up more traction, and then you'll see more of us out there. But right now, it is a marathon, and we're not trying to spend all of our energy out before we can even see the finish line.
Okay. Okay, that makes. I mean, you have to come up with your strategy, and each industry is a little differently in
And,
how they organize.
and like you said, part of it is me not giving away the game plan.
Fair point. Um, but yes. So and I'll say our Fight Back Radio listeners are our union supporters and overwhelmingly so. And so I want to encourage the listeners to check the news out, pay attention, and if you hear about some sort of anything going on with the flight attendants. The thing we talked about earlier, as Rasaq said, solidarity is so important. So we need to support our sisters and brothers who are trying to find a union with the Association of Flight Attendants at Delta Airlines. So that's very important. Unfortunately, we're starting to run out of time here.
Okay.
I've enjoyed this discussion. I've learned a lot
Likewise.
about your industry and your job. Is there anything that I haven't mentioned during our interview that you would like to highlight or to add or to bring up?
More than anything, I just want to make sure that all the listeners know that please go to deltaafa.org. We have everything from our petition to just how to keep in contact is on there. And for all of our labor supporters, even if Delta's a huge airline. If you're in a union, if you support the labor movement, more than likely you have a relative, neighbor, friend that works for Delta. Have that conversation with them. Let them know, like, hey, tell them your experience, why it works for you, why it's been beneficial. Because right now they're only hearing one side of it. And me seeing them once every 3 years doesn't resonate the same way that somebody close to them, that a neighbor does. So if you see them, talk to them, send them a Facebook message, send them an Instagram message. And when you fly on Delta, hopefully you fly Delta, because I do think we have the best flight attendants. Tell them like, hey, we support the movement, and it doesn't have to necessarily be a conflict thing, because some people might not understand. Just, hey, we support that movement, and if that's something that and let them know that that's something that they should be supporting, and how they should reach out to some of us, because it's really important.
Okay. That's excellent. So thank you for being our guest on Fight Back Radio, Rasaq.
All right. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. I'll come back anytime.
Okay, sounds good. We'll look forward to having you come back and talk about the negotiations for your first contract. How's that?
Yes, looking forward to that.
All right. Thank you.
Have a good one.
Okay, so we just had a tutorial on organizing the unorganized, why workers need a union, and especially workers at Delta Airlines. I want to thank again Rasaq Adeyemi, who was our guest, and just, excellent running it down. And you can see from Rasaq that, the leadership they have at the AFA, or the Association of Flight Attendants, that are organizing at Delta Airline. And I'm very confident that the flight attendants at Delta will have a union, and will have a union contract. I'm not sure when or how, but with leadership like that, I think it makes a difference. And I think that underlines another point. We need another 2 points, I'd say. We need everybody in this country, or at least many, many more, to be unionized. If we're going to have power as working people, we need to get out and organize the unorganized. And the second part of that is we need fighting unions. We need unions that workers want to join, that see a benefit in joining. And I think the Association of Flight Attendants is on the right track. Their leader, we mentioned in the interview, Sarah Nelson, is a fighter, and is not afraid to be critical of things in the labor movement that have gotten old and stodgy and are no longer dynamic and changing things for workers the way they need to. So Sarah is one of the dynamic leaders in our unions, in our union movement. So anyways, if you're not in a union, check it out. See if you can figure out how to get a union at your workplace if you're a worker. And if you are in a union, I encourage you to become active in that union and to make it a fighting union. Just before we sign off, I want to thank all of the Fight Back Radio listeners that went to Milwaukee to protest the Republican agenda and marched on the Republican National Convention. I met so many Fight Back Radio listeners there. That was fun for me. It was great to put faces with some of the ears that I know are out there. So that was exciting. And I want to invite everybody to come to Chicago, to my hometown, for a march on the Democratic National Convention. That's going to be on August 19th. We're going to be at Union Park at noon. We're going to gather, and we're going to march on the Democrats and demand some of the same things, but especially Palestine. I think there's a moment right now that Kamala Harris will get the nomination, or she has already electronically, and we know that for the last 4 years she's had to be loyal to Joe Biden's agenda on everything. But now is her opportunity to make, to announce and to start to move in a different direction around policy. And so I think it's particularly important that we protest around issues of Palestine and U.S. imperialism. And we started to see Biden move on this. So it's not time to take the foot off the gas. It's time to protest even more and to push, the ruling parties in this country to recognize self-determination. And if we don't fight for self-determination in Palestine, where are we going to? It's like there's people are oppressed because of their race and nationality everywhere around the world, including here in the United States. And so, and that's what's happening in Palestine, where they have an apartheid system that's backed by U.S. imperialism. And in fact, U.S. imperialism is right on the front burner. They've paid for all of the bombings that have happened, and it's been with U.S. troops. We're putting billions and billions of dollars into killing Palestinians instead of into education, parks, healthcare, and all the things that we need here in the United States. So hopefully we'll see you August 19th in Chicago. I look forward to meeting more of you again, and I appreciate that. Finally, I want to give a special shout out to our production team, and because we're making some changes here. We're doing, you might notice the background is a little different. We're bringing in new equipment, and in the long run, this is going to make the audio, the visual, Fight Back Radio much, much better. In the short run, it's causing some headaches as we transfer stuff over for our production team, and especially Shane Tremley and Vince Olson, so I appreciate you. Also, listeners, if you like Fight Back Radio, if you like this episode, tell others. Tell people, tell them about Rasaq's interview and that they should check it out. We need people, word of mouth. We need to give us 4 stars or thumbs up on whatever platform you're listening to this on. That helps people find us. Retweet, the promotions that we send out. Tell people about this so we can build up our listenership. And you have been. I know we've been growing at a good clip, but I want to keep that to continue. Again, our production team is Vince Olson, Shane Tremley, Natalie Pranis, and Dodd McColgan. And I'm Richard Berg for the entire cut that part. I'm Richard Berg for the entire Fight Back Radio team saying until next time, all power to the people.